Halloween night approaches once more, all the creatures waiting to emerge, whether to stalk the streets for candy or in the annual Scary Movie Marathon. Oh, or just maybe in a terrifying haunted house. I want to warn you, dear listener, an even scarier story awaits. A story of all the things that make a chill run down your spine appearing in court. Welcome to Sidebar, a podcast by Courthouse News. I'm your host and Sidebar's producer, Kirk McDaniel. On this episode, my co-reporters Nina Polano and Hillel Aaron join me around the virtual campfire to share some spooky legal stories. From a haunted house with a truly extreme liability release waiver, a copyright dispute over vampires, and an American literary icon returning from beyond the grave to pen one last book. This is sure to be a hauntingly good time. How's it going, Nina and hello? Welcome to the episode, our Halloween special.
Hey, thank you. Excited.
Nina, you had mentioned that you have a wonderful story, or I don't know if I should call it wonderful because it has to do with torture. So how about you go ahead and kick us off with this wonderfully terrifying, problematic story.
Yeah, wonderful is not the first word that comes to mind, although this is something many people are interested in doing. So haunted houses, classic, feature of Halloween. This particular haunted house is a little bit different than the ones that you might think about. I don't know about you. I loved haunted houses as a kid. I also kind of hated them. I feel like I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to get through it. But you think about the run-of-the-mill haunted house that can lead to kind of sort of expected lawsuits, slip and falls and carbon monoxide from fog machines, nuts and bolts sticking out of walls that you might get hurt on. This is a completely different kind of a haunted house, and the risks could not be more extreme.
That's great, because even though as an adult, there's no way that I'm even going anywhere close to a haunted house.
So this is called McCamey Manor. Have you guys heard of this place?
No.
I have heard of McCamey Manor and maybe seen a couple videos online, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Sort of like the uncontested scariest haunted house in the world. I don't even know if that's if a haunted house covers it. People sign up to be very literally tortured. And when I say signing up to be, literally tortured, this is they sign a 40-page waiver. This is, again, hours long. They agree it could be up to more than a day. And the waiver includes some of the things, again, you might think of a typical haunted house, disclose, you shouldn't do this if you're pregnant or if you might be prone to seizures, flashing lights, that kind of thing. And then it gets unhinged. So among the things that you agree may be happening to you are being tortured with medieval torture devices, water torture, your nails could be removed from their nail beds, you may be injected or given pills, hallucinogens or sedatives, subject to extreme temperatures, your hands and feet could be zip-tied, may be severely whipped with a fire hose or belt, asked to drink a wide variety of liquids including urine and blood, have your head enclosed in a box with bees, wasps, and may be stung, Houdini's Chinese water torture apparatus, which will include being submerged upside down by your ankles with a straitjacket in a cylinder with live moray eels, buried in a pit with hundreds of live rodents, mice, rats, tied down until you can figure out how to escape, locked inside a 55-gallon drum, and a lot of other stuff.
Where is this place?
So it started in San Diego. That location has since closed.
I wonder why.
Right. I think the owner says that it was a cost of living situation, but
California.
That's right.
Yeah, so now it has two locations. One is near Nashville, and the other one's in Huntsville, Alabama.
There are videos, like you mentioned, Kirk. There are videos online of this. So you may be asked to ingest live bugs. That's something they say. But if you watch these videos, I don't know that asked is really the word. I mean, people are, throughout the experience, you're being screamed at and humiliated and insulted. They're kind of yelling at you. And like I said before, my like childhood, like very kind of fluffy, basic haunted house, there was this feeling of wanting to like push myself, right? Like challenge myself. And that's essentially what the people who do this, that's a big question. Why?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm looking to push myself like this.
The people who do this say that that's it. They want to kind of have this very extreme, very hardcore experience because they want to push themselves. And that said, nobody has ever made it through the entire experience. It's been happening for about 30 years. And that probably says something. You know, you do say in the agreement, you are asked to write, like, what is your line? What is your, you know, do not cross this. And you can use a safe word. That used to actually not be the case, but at some point that was added to the experience.
So do people actually get their fingernails pulled out, or you're just signing that liability to sort of place you in that space?
It's a little bit of a black box. Like, I think you do sign an NDA as part of it.
It's not a black box if it's being filmed.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Right. So you sign an NDA, and you do have to agree to certain of your own terms. You do have to agree to some terms yourself, like confirming you're not under the influence of any drugs or alcohol, that you have medical insurance. Interestingly, that you've never been arrested or jailed for a felony. And then you sign saying, you know, participant agrees and understands that your life is in danger and this is not in danger. This is just a game. But the whole thing is supposed to be filmed, and this sort of maybe legally questionable waiver is all protecting the owner. Russ McKamey is his name. When people have sued the owner, and he says that that's happened numerous times over the years, he says that it's because people think certain things happened to them that have not actually happened. But there's a clause in the agreement: I hereby authorize and grant to Russ McKamey, the producer, and McKamey Manor, the right to record me, and edit the recording into a film/video program, may be posted on Facebook, YouTube, etc. And you release the rights to that video, but I think it's curious that that word edited is in there. The sort of, I guess, the most public instance of a person really speaking out about this and saying, like, this experience was not okay, was in 2016. A woman named Amy Milligan said that she was waterboarded. And the word water torture is in there. They talk about being submerged under 60 feet of water. They also talk about potentially being buried alive under 12 feet of dirt and having to, like, part of the experience is getting out of that. So the idea of water torture is in there, but Russ McKamey, the owner, says that never happened. We don't, that's not something that's part of the experience.
Let's take a quick break.
Hi, this is Ross, the host of Smells Like Humans, a show about interesting and quirky human behavior. We bring humor, empathy, and warmth to topics such as relationships, dating, work, self-compassion, weddings, phobias, aging parents, travel mishaps, death, and many more. Ever wonder what happens at a cuddle party? We talk about it. Free-range kids in restaurants? We've got some thoughts. Bedtime stories for adults? We're on it. Light, fun, unscripted conversation and personal stories. Please join us by clicking the link in the show notes.
How many lawyers do we think had to see this contract before it was ever approved?
Right. I mean, that's kind of I think they're just sort of like, how is this legal, and how are more people not, you know, there's been a petition of, you know, thousands of people saying, you know, this shouldn't be allowed. So there are a few protections that I think are in place, right? So one, he says the waterboarding never happened, and he has a video of the entire thing. Amy Milligan says that he edited the video, and so the worst parts of it are not actually shown. And also, I mean, reporters and you know, journalists have gone through the experience to sort of just out of, you know, morbid fascination and to write about it. And he's also admitted that when that happens, they get what he calls a sissy tour, like a toned down version
Hi, this is Beth Accomando, and I just emerged from McCamey Manor. I wanted to do a story on it, and Russ McCamey said I could come out there if I allowed him to blindfold me and to drive me out to the secret location. I thought once I was at the secret location, I would just get to sit down and do some interviews, but I had to go through what they called the Sissy Tour. And even though it was the Sissy Tour, I had some pretty creepy, disgusting, and scary things happen. So be watching for my story on KPBS.
So there are these sort of, ways that he's been protected, but even so, you can find legal experts saying like this is not necessarily something that would hold up in court. And he's been sued again. He said numerous times over the years. So it's interesting that I think the woman who did really speak out, Amy Milligan, went to the police and decided not to file a report ultimately, but it definitely blew up. And I think that her story kind of got a lot of people thinking and talking about this.
So, as you mentioned, many of these filmed experiences and often are posted online by McCamey Manor for use in promotional videos. And yeah, they are just as extreme as you described, Nina. I think for me, it makes all the more shocking since that this is a real person, like you or me who signed up for this experience. I would definitely offer a trigger warning before watching them. Do people pay to do this?
Right. No, absolutely. They're hard to watch. And one of the kind of, again, talking about the legality, one of the protections that the owner, Russ McCamey, has here, there's no entrance fee, but you can and are, asked to bring dog treats and dog food for his rescue greyhounds. And because of that, he's registered as a nonprofit. So that means he's not under the jurisdiction of the Better Business Bureau. He's not subject to some of the same, federal and local controls that are over that regulate businesses. He's in this he's found sort of a bit of a loophole, right?
How does he pay for it if he doesn't charge money?
That's a great question that I don't have the answer to.
We don't know. All right. He sells the dead bodies on the black market.
Oh, gosh. I don't know if I said this yet, but the wait list has between 20 and 30,000 people on it. This is like something people want to do. People want to do this with their time. They want to have this experience, like a lot of people. So I don't know, pushing yourself in ways that I can't say I would ever sign up for, but at least that impulse I get from, childhood, like this is going to suck while I'm in it, but then I'll have done it and feel somewhat triumphant and go get my donuts and cider. And that's like the full Halloween experience.
Yeah. I think I might stick to hiking for that experience.
Check out the foliage.
Yeah, right. Wow. Well, that is an intense story. Thank you for bringing it for us.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, I don't know if I could say go ahead and check out these videos online, but at your own risk. That might be enough for most of us as far as scaring the shit out of ourselves. So another one that I just want to quickly talk about, rather than a haunted house, a house that is haunted, like American Horror Story season 1 style. It's a famous case called Stambovsky versus Ackley. And it's in New York. This is like in maybe like 1989, 1990. A man named Jeffrey Stambovsky buys a house in Nyack, New York, which is just north of New York City, at $650,000. And before he made a down payment, his real estate broker calls him and he's like, just so you know, this house is haunted. And by then there had been a few reports, mostly in local papers, that the family living there had seen ghosts. The owner, Helen Ackley, said that her grandkids were there and got gifts from the, poltergeists of baby rings, which I didn't know what that is. Do you guys know what baby rings are?
No.
Nope. You got me.
Stolen babies.
Right. That was my thought. I was like, that doesn't seem like that could be easily gifted to a child. They're what they sound like. They're literal like tiny rings for babies to wear. They were, I guess, really big in the Victorian era, and like especially for, you know, portraits, you want the baby to be glammed up, I guess.
Blinged out.
Yeah, so anyway, Helen Ackley's grandkids, they get these baby rings, and then the rings would later disappear.
Go figure.
That's right. You know, her daughter said that like the bed would shake. One of the ghosts would like shake up the bed. But yeah, you know, other kind of classic ghost things, slamming doors and footsteps. And some of the family says that they did, you know, make kind of eye-to-eye contact with ghosts. And maybe, you know, one of them said there was a Navy lieutenant, a Revolutionary Navy lieutenant who he just saw kind of full on. Yeah, so these stories are out there, but the guy who just bought the house, Jeffrey Stambovsky, doesn't really know about this. It's sort of like local lore. It's a little bit, you know, north of the city, debatably upstate New York. That's a whole thing people love to gripe about here. And his broker gives him a call, and he's like, just so you know, the house is haunted. And the buyer is like, you know, LOL, like, we'll have to call the Ghostbusters. Like, he doesn't take it seriously. He doesn't really know these stories. And the sale goes through. But then after the sale goes through, he's like, I kind of want to talk to the family that was already there about the whole ghost situation. So he sits down, he talks directly with the Ackleys. And once he hears it from them, he's kind of like, oh shit, I bought a haunted house. It all kind of, it changed the tenor than just, you know, getting that call saying, yeah, heads up.
It's kind of giving that feeling of, you know, city dweller not respecting the rural lifestyle.
Right. Totally.
Well, this is the common trope in all these haunted house stories, even actually some monster movies of like,
mm-hmm.
I don't go in for all these weird, you know, hick folk beliefs.
And that's basically exactly what happened. He's living in New York City, and well, ultimately that helped him out. That sort of you know, being removed from the local folks. He goes ahead and he sues the Ackleys, he sues the real estate firm, and he lost at first in New York Supreme Court, at state court, appeals to New York appellate court, and he actually won the case. And that was very much part of it. You know, from the opinion, not being a local, plaintiff could not readily learn that the home he had contracted to purchase is haunted. Whether the source of the spectral apparitions seen by defendant seller are parapsychic or psychogenic, having reported their presence in both a national publication, that was Reader's Digest, and the local press back in 1977 and again in 1982, defendant is stopped to deny their existence, and as a matter of law, the house is haunted.
Wow.
Which is just pretty awesome.
When was that court ruling?
The appeal came out in 1991, so over just a couple years, late 80s.
So in 1991, an appeals court judge said that house is legally haunted. Legally haunted.
As a matter of law, the house is haunted. Mic drop.
See, this is why I want to be a judge, because you can just say whatever you want.
And it's interesting, the lower court, the opinion in the appeals court also notes that the lower court reluctantly dismissed the case. Like, the original judges hearing it even were like, yeah, there's something here.
Whenever he sued, what was his like suit for exactly? Just to stop the sale of the house and get his money back? Or
the gripe was that they didn't disclose, which again, he got that call from his broker, but they didn't disclose that this was, you know, a risk. I mean, that was the heart of it. It was that they did not fully sort of underscore what this was like, just getting that one call that obviously he didn't. He made the Ghostbusters joke, and this case is often referred to as the Ghostbusters lawsuit, Ghostbusters ruling.
Huh. And
it's incredible.
Do we think that maybe it was like opportunity missed? Because even if he didn't have to live in there, he could have rented it out to people, you know, who want a ghost experience.
That's a great point, right?
Those people...
Housing is expensive. Houses are expensive.
Open up a third location of McMamie Manor.
I'm just trying to think if this went to the U.S. Supreme Court, how they would rule on the question of the existence of ghosts. Like, you know, is Clarence Thomas a believer in ghosts? Probably.
Right. Yeah, that could bring out some fun fun opinions and dissents.
Are you someone who is on the wait list for McCamey Manor? Maybe a more traditional haunted house is more your speed. If you're anything like me, scary movies are the best way to get into the spirit. For this next story, Hillel takes us back to post-World War I Germany for the origin story of one of the earliest horror films.
Which are the two, in your opinion, which are the two most iconic Halloween characters of all time?
Halloween characters.
I would have to say Michael Myers has got to be one. I mean, the name of his movie is Halloween. The other one, I would say, I'd have to say vampires.
As someone who grew up in the 1980s and 90s and, fan of the song Monster Mash, for me, the two are Dracula and Frankenstein. And did you know that both of them have their origins on the same night? A night much like this one, between not 3 people, but 4 people. 4 people were Lord Byron, his doctor, John Polidori, which may or may not be the correct pronunciation, and 2 other writers, Percy and Mary Shelley. Four of them were in a cabin in 1816 in Lake Geneva, Switzerland. One night, they were reading German horror stories to each other, as one does, and Lord Byron suggested that they have a contest, that they all come up with spooky stories and see who can write the best spooky story. Mary came up with a story that would later become Frankenstein. And Lord Byron also wrote a story about a vampire called Vampire, with a Y, Y-R-E, at the end of it. And, vampires have been around as a folk belief for a couple hundred years, mostly in Eastern Europe. The idea of a vampire had kind of popped up in a few poems here and there, but it was actually Lord Byron's doctor who ended up taking the story, and he actually published it, like a story by Lord Byron, but I wrote it. I don't know why he did that way. I'm assuming to give it more notoriety, like to sort of a name drop, because the doctor himself wasn't famous. Anyways, he publishes
because if doctor isn't enough, Lord is always
Lord
a better
Byron
title.
is a much better title. I agree. And anyway, so this is the first instance of vampires in literature, and it sort of is the seed of the genre, basically, which in the genre reaches maturity in 1897 when Bram Stoker publishes Dracula. Bram Stoker, Irish guy, theater manager, written a few books, none of which were super successful. Dracula was successful, and it really kind of solidifies a lot of key things in the genre. But there were also just vampire books of the time, so it was like sort of his take on the genre, and maybe the most sort of successful version of it at the time, but not super original. I mean, it was a genre book, essentially. And it's in this book that that vampirism becomes sort of like a disease that can be passed on. This was one of his key innovations. And it really struck a chord at the time in Victorian Britain, when tuberculosis and syphilis were like really rampant, and people were really afraid of all sorts of diseases. And in fact, Stoker may have died of syphilis when he died 15 years later. It was either syphilis or overwork, as I read somewhere. So, it can be easily confused. Now, Dracula was filmed for the first time, I think 24 years after it was written, 1921. This Hungarian silent film, Dracula Halala. This was an unauthorized adaptation.
So, basically, you have to get the movie rights even back in the 1920s?
Yeah, even in the 1920s, there were copyright laws. Interestingly, the copyright laws were kind of similar. For a book or a movie, certainly for a book, you had to say in the beginning of the book, this book is copyrighted, blah, blah, blah. And it's sort of a key provision of the copyright law. And Dracula messed it up somehow. So the book Dracula, in America, the book Dracula lapsed into public domain a little bit after Bram Stoker died. But importantly, it did not lapse into public domain in Germany. An important fact for later in this story. A quick word about Bram Stoker's widow. She was not into Dracula. So, her syphilis-ridden husband dies. She's a widow. She's hard up for cash, but she's also like in Victorian society, and she cares about her good name. And Dracula was seen as kind of this titillating book, maybe not like prudish Victorian England didn't appreciate it. I guess also people made fun of her a little as they called her like the bride of Dracula or the wife of Dracula. Her granddaughter later told the Daily Mail that she was teased mercilessly about being married to Dracula. So it's like she's going broke, but she hates Dracula. Dracula is the only book that actually made any money that her husband wrote. So she's in kind of a quandary. But point being that when some German filmmakers come to her and ask, hey, can we buy the rights to film Dracula? She says no. So the Germans just sort of figure, well, we'll just do it anyway. They probably figure, here we are, post-World War I Germany, there's no internet. Who's going to know? This movie ends up getting directed by a very famous German filmmaker, F.W. Murnau. He would later become famous. At the time, he was not famous. He became known as the master of, quote, German expressionism. Actually came to America, made this movie Sunrise, which was sort of this female melodrama. But his early filmography, he's like a horror director. So they changed the name of the movie to Nosferatu. They changed the character from Count Dracula to Count Orlok. And it's basically this low-budget German movie, takes place in a small little German town. In the book, Count Dracula is a nobleman. He's like an aging nobleman, lives in a castle. He's described as sort of being bald on top, but being like a hairy old man with like these bushy eyebrows. He says Bram Stoker describes his eyebrows as very massive and has this heavy mustache. I mean, really nothing like what we think of as the modern Dracula.
Yeah, it sounds more like a werewolf.
Yeah, he's sort of like this, but like you can kind of picture him, right? He's like this old man with wild, unkept eyebrows and like hair where it shouldn't be, and lack of hair when there should be hair, and in decent shape, maybe a little pale. And Nosferatu, Count Orlok, is like a monster. I mean, he's crazy looking, but yeah, he's a monster. He's got these long fingernails, these really long teeth, dark circles under his eyes. He's like totally cue ball hairless. And so the plot is similar, but there's no Van Helsing. Van Helsing is of course in a way, kind of the protagonist, the guy that ends up killing Dracula. He's like a monster hunter. And so there's none of that in Nosferatu. It's pretty dark. A key thing is Nosferatu travels to this German village on a ship and brings all these rats with him, and there's this plague, and it feels very like Middle Ages, as opposed to Dracula, which is more kind of like the old world butting up against the modern world. In post World War I Germany, there is no modern world. It's just like everything is bad all the time, and that's kind of the feeling you get watching Nosferatu, which is, I should say, it's a great movie. I mean, if you were to like watch 5 silent movies, this might be the one sort of serious silent movie that I would recommend watching, because all the other good silent movies are comedies. So the Germans, they make this movie. It's pretty long. It's like an hour and a half, and but they commit a fatal error, similar to stepping into the sunlight. In the movie's premiere, they write on the program that it had been, quote, freely adapted from Bram Stoker's book Dracula. So in April, Florence Stoker gets a mysterious unmarked letter along with the program, which gives away the ghost, as we like to say. She sees this. She's super pissed. She's not happy. She goes to the British Incorporated Society of Authors and convinces them to hire a German lawyer. And the society is sort of like, they don't really want to deal with this. They don't want to pay the money for a lawyer, but they also, are supposed to be protecting their writers. Is this their responsibility? Is it not? They decide, all right, well, we'll hire the German lawyer. We'll try to settle it quickly out of court. They even say this in a letter, like, we're not in this for a long haul. We're in this to settle it quickly. But it did not settle quickly. It did go on for 3 years. According to letters, the Society of Authors is constantly trying to wriggle out of this court battle. But Florence Stoker just will not let them, threatens them, has a lot of sort of British writer friends that, sort of like, you guys have to keep this up. And it's just a whole legal mess. The production company that made Nosferatu went bankrupt after Nosferatu. I mean, just immediately. And probably more due to mismanagement than anything else, but possibly the lawsuit didn't help. So now the society in Florence are going after like the new owners of this movie. In 1924, a German court awards Florence £5,000, which is about £300,000 in today's money, also about $300,000 in today's money. But the new production company appeals, and Florence at some point just changes her demands, says she doesn't want any money, she just wants the movie destroyed, like burned. And she doesn't want anyone to see it. I mean, I think she probably really wanted the intellectual property that was Dracula to be snuffed out in a way, because she didn't want her husband's name and her name remembered with that. Unfortunately, that is exactly what it's remembered for. So 1925, the film owners abandon their appeal, they give up, and the German judge orders that all remaining copies of Nosferatu be burned. Unfortunately for Florence, the movie's already been distributed around the world, including the United States, where Dracula has lapsed into public domain. And so the movie's not burned, it survives. When you watch Nosferatu on YouTube or wherever, it's like a copy of a copy, kind of. It's been restored using various techniques, but some scenes will be like very kind of grainy, and you really are watching this relic. And it's just amazing that this movie survived. That most silent movies didn't survive. The type of film they used was very unstable. Would basically it's actually like really flammable. There's all sorts of movies that just burned away. So it is kind of ironic that this German judge ordered Nosferatu be burned. But somehow it survived when all these other movies accidentally burned.
Also, I think for the enforcement of copyright law, to have the copies burned, that's hardcore.
Yeah.
That, dare I say, conjures images of torch and pitchfork wielding villagers.
Later to be seen in Frankenstein.
I'm sure you are well aware of the author Mark Twain. You probably remember reading his books, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn, while you were in school. Well, allow me to introduce you to possibly the last book he ever wrote. I say possibly because this final book wasn't quite written by him. Just hang in there. You'll see what I mean. Have either of you ever heard of the story of the book Jap Herron?
Tell us.
It makes some sense that you've never heard of the book since it was published back in 1917. To properly set the stage for the story, I want to tell you a little bit about the spiritualism scene in the early 20th century. Across the country, the idea that the dead still lives amongst the living was becoming a more and more popular idea. This comes some years after the mass production of the Ouija board, or talking boards, and the rise of people specializing in the occult. Fun fact, while the Ouija board is actually a well-known name for talking boards, the toy company Hasbro actually owns the trademark to the name Ouija board. So, during this time, people who claim to have the ability to communicate with the dead, known as mediums, were holding seances in the hopes of communicating with lost loved ones or even famous people. 2 mediums from St. Louis, Emily Grant Hutchings and Lola V. Hayes, seemingly struck the, spirit jackpot when the spirit of Mark Twain spoke to them from the great beyond and tasked them with recording his next novel. Now, it is important to mention that Twain had been dead for 10 years by this time and was already a well-beloved storyteller. The book, Hutchings and Hayes, helped the incorporeal writer put to paper would come to be known as Jap Herron, a novel written by the Ouija board. And believe me, that is the exact title. I will repeat it again. It is Jap Herron, a novel written from the Ouija board.
So what's the book about?
The book is about a young boy named Jasper James, called Jap for short, who lives in Missouri. And after his father dies, he finds himself separated from his family, spurring a journey of self-discovery. I should admit that I have not read the book, but my impression based on the synopsis is that it's a bit of a rags to riches story. The book, of course, rose to fame since it, 1, had Mark Twain's name on it, and 2, claimed his ghost wrote it. Since our listeners cannot see, I am actually using air quotes around the word written. I don't know what the masses thought of the book, but a review from the New York Times did not give it high marks. The 1917 review read, "If this is the best Mark Twain," in quotes, "can do by reaching across the barrier, the army of admirers that his works have won for him will all hope that he will hereafter respect that boundary."
Ooh, it's a flop.
Yeah, it seems like, if you can go downhill in old age, certainly you'd go downhill in the grave.
Yeah, give him a break. He's dead.
Yeah, impressive that he's even getting anything out there.
Reviews aside, there was one person who was very displeased by the book, and that was none other than Twain's daughter, Clara Clements. She actually filed a copyright lawsuit against the 2 mediums over the book and was seeking for the 2 mediums to publicly admit that the book was a fraud or give all the proceeds from the book to the Twain estate. This lawsuit ended up not going anywhere. The parties actually settled the lawsuit, which resulted in Hutchings and Hayes ceasing further publication of the book and destroying all existing copies. Now, sort of similar to your story, Hillel, in Nosferatu, the book survived and can still be found online to read for free, and physical copies of the book are also still floating around out there. I've even seen one first edition copy on sale for well over $200.
A chilling tale of censorship.
It takes ghostwriting to a whole new level.
Hey.
There it is. There it is.
Hello, Nina. Thank you so much for hopping on with me. It's wonderful getting to talk to you guys. It's also wonderful to talk to you guys about the season. And yeah, have any fun Halloween plans?
Trick-or-treating with my child, both of us dressed as construction workers.
Got a Halloween party, and I'm sure I'll figure out my costume 2 hours before it begins.
Well, guys, it's been wonderful, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, it was great. Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Haunted houses, scary movies, and ghosts. What more could you want from a Halloween special? Well, we did forget the candy, I guess. If there is one thing Courthouse News reporters do well, it is finding the interesting, weird, and even sometimes spooky legal stories lurking about in courtrooms around the world. Be sure to stay up to date with those stories and more at courthousenews.com, and follow us on Twitter at Courthouse News. On our next episode, I'll take you on the hunt as we dive into the profession of bounty hunting. See you then.